Do you want to play tabletop games online? Well, you're in luck because you're listening to a Pro GM with over 1,000 games run, and I just so happen to be filling tables for campaigns right now. Curse of Strahd, Exandria, Heart, and Vampire the Masquerade. Now is the time to reserve your seat so I can quit my day job and go back to doing what I love, crafting fun adventures with my players. Check out the link in the show notes. Click the play button on my website. You'll see it at the top next to the podcast button, or simply go to startplaying.games/GM/It's Friday to book your seat with one of the world's top game masters. That's me. Welcome back to Dollars and Dragons, and today I have with me Chris Bissette. If you'd like to introduce yourself to our audience.
Hello, I am Chris Bissette. I am an award-winning game designer, writer, musician from the UK, probably best known as the person who runs Loot the Room.
Yeah, and if you want to check out any of the Patreon links or Loot the Room or Dungeon Game, which we're going to be talking about today, you will find those links in the show notes. But let's get to chatting. So you started this website, Loot the Room. For those uninitiated, what's it about? How did it start? Let's get into it.
So Loot the Room just started as a blog when I've been into role-playing games since the early 90s because I'm old as hell. But I got back into them sort of 2015, 2016 and started doing the blogging thing, and Loot the Room started as a blog. And then I very, very quickly started to self-publish work on like the DMs Guild, etc. And it just sort of became the brand that I published under. And these days I publish all sorts of things, solo journaling games, systems. I write OSR adventures, all sorts of stuff.
You're also in a metal band, right?
Correct, yes. We're sort of on unofficial hiatus at the minute,
Okay.
just because, 2020 happened and nobody could tour and everybody's lives changed in a big way. But yeah, I'm in a band called Dead Throne. We put out an album a few years ago, 2019, on A Rising Empire. That's really fucking good. I don't even know if I'm allowed to swear on this thing, but I just did.
No, you're good.
Yeah, it's really cool. We're really proud of it. We are allegedly doing a second album, but we'll see when that happens.
You have like a really big, wide breadth of experience, and I find that's so fascinating about TTRPG in general is that because a living wage really isn't supported in so many corners of TTRPG, most of the professionals are professionals elsewhere. So it's really
Yeah.
fun to like meet such a diverse background of people. Most jobs or industries or professionals, especially once you get up to the level where you'd be considered like quote unquote award winning or like in a way that you're recognized by the industry for like doing great shit, then you're like you've been there for like 40 years or whatever, or you've been there for however long. And
And you probably still aren't doing it full time as well. You're probably still not
yeah,
able to make a living at it. Yeah. It's
yeah.
very, I often think it's very funny that the two industries that I chose to focus on and make a go at were music and RPGs, which are famously the two industries where nobody gets to make any money.
Oh yeah, it's tragic, but like there are some things that I enjoy about it personally. Just my commentary is I hate living paycheck to paycheck, but I
Yep.
love being able to do what I love. Obviously, that's the
Oh yeah,
benefit.
totally.
So,
It's great. And I've had a couple of years of being full time in RPGs now and not having like I'm back to living paycheck to paycheck now for a variety of reasons, but um the past couple of years I haven't had to worry about that, and like going from literally like crippling poverty, like so poor that my teeth were falling out of my head through stress, to making a living doing what I love has been amazing. So hopefully I'll get to continue doing that. We'll see what the next year brings.
it's really difficult to get someone who is really great at tabletop to stick around
Mhm.
because someone who's great at something can become great at something else that makes them more money.
Yeah, very true. Yeah.
Yeah. So we lose a lot of talent in the industry because there just isn't a support structure. And the more marginalized you are,
Mm,
then the more difficult
totally.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah, like I've been like, even though I was very, very poor for a long time, I've been very lucky that, I live in the UK and I'm white and look like a dude. Like there's a huge amount of privilege coming into it there that I've benefited from for sure.
Yeah, likewise. I thankfully came from a support structure and I had money right when I started, and like I have people in my life who really allow me to do this. And I really wouldn't have this opportunity if I didn't have like a supportive person that helps me pay bills and things like that. Paying bills like on your own, living on your own, and starting a family on freelancer pay is immensely difficult because
It's
most
so hard.
most big publishers don't pay very much. Um,
Yeah.
and we were just talking about this prior to the podcast that actually indies will pay better than big
Oh, totally.
publishers.
And I one of the reasons I've done a lot of freelance work and worked on a lot of really cool books, but the majority of my work has been self-published, and that's purely because you can put in the same amount of work for something that you write yourself as for something that you write for a big company and make 10 times the amount of money. Like maybe a fraction of the people will see it, but you're keeping all the profits. I remember sitting down and working out how much I'd been paid for The Wretched, which was my big game, and I can't remember what the number was now, and it will have gone up since I worked this out, but you know, it's we're looking at like dollars per word on that book, which is not something that exists when you do freelance work.
Yeah.
Um, like for me at this point, the freelance work exists to because some of it's really fun, but also it exists to put my name in front of people who wouldn't otherwise have heard of me and to try and grow my audience for my solo stuff. Um, which has worked. I don't know how well it's worked for a lot of the books, but stuff like I did an adventure for Arcadia called Filthy Peasants. Um, that's been huge for me. So many people have bought my adventures and stuff and have messaged me to say like, "Hey, I only know who you are because you wrote this adventure for Arcadia." Um, the irony being that Arcadia is by far the best paying company I've freelanced for as well, which is really funny.
Yeah, 25 cents a word.
Yeah, it's
That's
incredible.
at the time it was unheard of when I remember when they announced that and I was like, that makes me curious about what everyone else pays. And then I would look into it and I was like, oh no.
Oh no, yeah. Yeah, Arcadia were great. And on top of good pay, they were really good people to work for, which was very nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Working with James Intricaso is like Intricaso?
Yeah, never sure. I've always said
Oh,
Intricaso.
okay.
And I've recorded podcasts with him and I've heard the man say it himself, but my memory's terrible. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry, James.
No, that's fine. Working with James is one of the things that I'm really interested in doing. I've heard such great things about working with him, and I've heard so many wonderful things about his beautiful mind.
He's great. Like James and I sort of circled each other for a few years because obviously he ran World Builder blog for a very long time, so I knew who he was, but we were both active on the DMs Guild at the same time. He obviously was much more kind of successful and popular than I was, but yeah, we circled each other for a few years, and then I had the opportunity 2019 or 2020, I think 2020, to record. I can't remember the name of the podcast he used to do. It's gone out of my mind completely. But I had an opportunity to record an episode of the podcast with him, which was the first time we kind of spoke face to face. And he's a lovely, lovely man. And then, yeah, he asked me to pitch something for one of the very early issues of Arcadia. And it was just an absolute joy to work with him. And then I got to work with him again on something that came out, and I think the penultimate or final issue of Arcadia, um, which I worked with Hannah Rose initially, and then when she left Arcadia, James took over to finish the editing on that. And Hannah was great to work with as well, but yeah, working with James is always like super special. Like he's really encouraging, and like he just fucking gets it, Like
Yeah.
he's great. And he gives feedback where he's like, I can't say enough good things about working for Arcadia. One of the great things about them is that they will give you super clear feedback, and they explain why they're giving you this feedback. But then it's entirely up to you whether you actually take it on board or not. Like they're they're super interested in shaping your work into the best thing it possibly can be, but also at the same time in letting you retain your creative vision for it, even though you don't own it at the end. Like it's all work for hire. So like I don't own Filthy Peasants, I don't own Dungeon Encounters, but I'm still super proud of them. Um, and like Filthy Presents went from about 4,000 words to about 9,000 words because James just kept coming back to me and saying, "Put this in, put this in. This is going to be great. Put more stuff in," and like that was really great. And then to get paid for it as well, obviously, is just icing on the cake, really.
Yeah, that's the dream. Honestly, I've worked with a lot of the Arcadia and Flea Mortals sort of alum, and
Mhm.
they have said all similar things. So I was gonna bring all of the stuff you just brought up. So I'm glad you brought it up, because I was like, I like to verify these things. I like to ask if everyone had a similar experience, because sometimes that's not the case. Like
Yeah,
sometimes,
yeah,
yeah, but yeah, I've basically heard the same story from everyone who's worked with James.
amazing.
And
That's great.
yeah, so
Lucky.
consistency. Yeah. That's one of the things I was talking about with the other James, actually, pretty recently, James Hake. And they were saying that uh, it's actually one of the things that they think lacks most in the industry is that there's not a lot of mentorship that you'll
Totally true.
find because people are afraid to give feedback because they just don't either have enough, and this is me extrapolating and not James's comments, but like I imagine it is don't have the experience to really deep to have the deep knowledge to tell you why they're giving you feedback. They would just prefer it a certain way. And then also they're afraid of like the confrontation of it, or they think it's not worth the trouble of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of mentorship happens behind closed doors. People have their own little cliques and their own little groups who will mentor each other. But I think getting mentorship from people who are actually like experts at what they do, is super hard. And there's a few people doing it. Like working with James on Arcadia, there was a lot of mentorship there, but obviously you need to be at a position where Arcadia are asking you to write for them before you get
Hmm.
access to that. But then there's people like Luke Gearing, who has just become the full-time writer for Tuesday Night Games, who publish Mothership. Um, for the past few years, he's been running a mentorship program where he takes on one mentee and sort of works with them very closely.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I've only heard, like, I know Luke and he's a good friend, so I trust that that's a really good process, but I don't know because I haven't seen inside that process. But I've only
Yeah.
heard good things about it. And then another good friend is Matt Sanders, who works for Rowan Rook and Deckard. And he does this thing that he calls New Creator Hour, where he just sort of like gives up an hour of his time to anyone who needs it for free. And they're both super valuable. Obviously, they're both cishet white men, so there's an issue there. But
Hmm.
I think anyone sharing their time and their expertise like that is a super valuable thing. I would love to see more of that happen.
You've kind of touched on one of the things that's the elephant in the room for a lot of the industry in which we just have a lot of cis white men, and then we have white people
Mm.
like you and me. You're white, right?
Very,
Okay,
very.
okay. I realized I should have probably asked before I
Oh
said
no,
that comment
I
about you.
get I get I get a tan under a full moon.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'm like kind of Irish, French, Norwegian, so there's like a tiny drop of Spanish blood in me that's like from the I think it's like the 16 to 1800s is like where that lineage comes from.
Right.
But it's like so far removed that it's like if I claim it in anything except to mention that it's just the tiniest bit, then it feels weird.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't raised in the culture and any of that. But anyway, the elephant in the room for the industry really is that there are so many uh, straight and white people in these positions, and it can feel like ivory tower gaming, in which you have these people that have sort of like positioned themselves over time to really reinforce their own biases.
Mhm.
And I think it's unfortunately like so recently the Twitter gossip, the Twitter drama was that Goodman Games
Uh-huh.
um, posted a like, hey, indie creator summit or whatever, and they were advertising some of their panelists on
Mhm.
Twitter, and they posted a panelist like advertisement on Twitter with 10 white men. Um, and so you look at the other creators that they picked, and it was like 57 in total, and I think like 10 to 13 were not straight white men.
Uh-huh.
and they didn't put any of them on the initial graphic. And then secondly, it was kind of like perhaps a misstep to not open up your net a little bit wider than that. And to just have it like be literally 80% straight white men, that feels weird to me. Um,
Yeah, for
not
sure. I
even
mean,
a
sorry,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just gonna say not even an even split on women really, because it was like, what's the so they released a second graphic after like they got dragged on Twitter. It was like 1 million views or some shit, and then they posted a second graphic the next day, and it had like four women on it and two people of color. I believe I didn't really look at it closely or like inquire or dig deep, but it's at that point it's just like, okay, well, like what steps are you actually taking to fix this? And then some exclusive tea on the podcast. I didn't post this in public, but this will come out eventually. Um, and I don't know if they reached out to other people, but I had like the Goodman Games CM reach out to me and they were like, "Hey, can you be on the show and stuff?" And I'm just like, "You shouldn't be reaching out to me because I'm white, first of all. Like, you need to be reaching out to like some people of color in order to like, and secondly, I'm not your diversity hire. Like, I'm not here to like provide, some reparation for Goodman Games' reputation
Yeah.
that they have built themselves over these past 10 years when people have started to move in this direction and Goodman Games is 10 years behind."
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen any of that, so I don't. It's not something I can speak to at all, really. What I will say is that I know some of the people who work for Government Games, and yes, they're all white. Like I know, like Harley Stroh quite well, and like met like Jen and Michael Curtis and people like that. And what I will say about Government is that I often call them soft grogs because they've got one foot in that sort of like that grognard space, but they're all people who
They're cool.
they want to do better,
Yeah.
even if they don't always get it right. So obviously, I haven't seen any of this.
Hmm.
I can't speak to any of it. They are a company who I trust to at least acknowledge that they fucked up and try to mitigate it.
They did.
Um, that's good. And like the most recent printing of the DCC rulebook, like they went through and like they removed it. It was that very classic, like always refers to the DM as he, etc. And they
Right.
went through and like depronouned it, which caused a lot of upset among the more
Oh yeah.
reactionary parts of their fan base. And
Yeah.
their response to that was, "We don't give a shit, fuck off." So
Good.
obviously,
That's
it will
cool.
come out in the wash how they've actually dealt with this. And like I say, I don't have any of the details, but I do. I'm will personally, I'm obviously white person, so
Hmm.
my opinion on this is worth very little. But personally, willing to extend them the benefit of the doubt. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Hopefully they fix it, and hopefully they learn from it.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't have happened in the first place.
Yeah, that's it. My criticism of Goodman Games is probably the same criticism I would have of like one of my publishing partners who I love them very dearly, like Kobo Press. Like, so we have a publisher that is almost entirely white. And
Mhm.
then for the people who aren't white that you've hired in, you've just like there's these white companies that will hire like they'll make a diversity hire for someone in like a community manager position or
Yeah.
something like that, in which they're like forward facing and stuff. But then they have the upward mobility? Do they have like these other things that you might want to provide, or do they have a voice in the company, or are they just basically like cleaning up your mess? You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? So I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like I sort of wish that there was a more concerted effort to um, hire permanent employees instead of
Yeah.
just freelancers amongst
Yeah.
the people of color, the game designers of color. So
Totally.
I see that so often, and it seems like for whatever reason, white people are just adverse to doing it. And I get
Yeah.
people
I don't think.
asking me privately, "How do you get in touch with so many people of color?" And I was just like, "I'm just not afraid to email them. I don't understand
Yeah.
what the issue is."
Literally know who they are and speak to them and ask them. Just speak to people.
Yeah, where's my Staples easy button? That was easy, you know? Like it's not rocket science. It's like literally
No.
just email them, please.
Yeah, like the same way you go about approaching all the white people you work with. It's literally that. Like same shit.
Yeah, I think it's like
I think historically a big part of the problem has been that a lot of, so especially among American publishers, a lot of the jobs and a lot of the work and a lot of the networking, it happens at Gen Con.
Oh yeah.
And, to be able to attend Gen Con in the first instance, you need to be from a particular social background.
Yes.
You need to have, because it's not cheap.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
and
very
so
expensive.
that results in the industry skewing very hard in the direction of middle-aged white men who work in tech.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's an astute observation. I didn't go to Gen Con this year because I'm too poor. But
Same. I went last year because I spent
okay.
2 years saving up for it, and
Oh
I did
yeah.
not go this year because I couldn't spend 2 years saving up for it,
Yeah,
you know?
it's for me it's like and I live in the States, but I'm on the West Coast. So for me, with the plane ticket, the hotel, and the opportunity cost of not working,
Mhm.
because I work from home, is 2 to 3 thousand minimum
Yeah,
to just
totally.
attend the convention, and I'm just like, and then also it's like the cost opportunity of like not running my games, and that threatens my games falling apart in some
Yeah,
way. You know what I mean? So
totally.
it's
Like, for
like,
me, just the flight alone is $1,200.
oh my God, wow.
That's just to get to the States. So,
Hmm.
yeah, it's not something that's possible for me unless a publisher is gonna fly me out there in future, basically, and,
Yeah,
I don't do enough work for publishers for them to justify flying me out there, so
yeah, yeah.
that's it
I
is what.
That's why I'm so excited about initiatives like in Big Bad Con where they have the scholarships
Mhm,
for people
totally.
who can't make those sort of networking connections.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then,
And it is super important, like, it's a shame that meeting people in person is often so much more important than people having seen what your work is, but, like, I've just been to Dragon Meet in the UK this weekend, and I've come away from that with, I think, 3 offers of work from people who I just met and said, "Yeah, I'm a writer too," and they haven't seen my work, like, why
right.
should I just get a job because I said hello to someone at a convention? And, my work is good, and I know that when I send them writing samples, they're gonna be like, "Yeah, okay, we made the right decision," but
Hmm.
for people who couldn't go to that convention, you don't get that work. And that's a
Yeah,
big problem that's been a problem in the industry since the 1970s, and it's one that we figured out how to solve during COVID when all the conventions went online, and then all the convention organizers sort of forgot that we'd ever figured that out the second everything went back in person, and that's not
yeah,
cool.
yeah. I will list Big Bad Con as probably my after attending Big Bad Con, and there's such a have you ever been? I
I
assume
haven't,
not.
no.
Okay, yeah.
No.
It's so prohibitively expensive.
Yeah.
The only reason I can afford it is because it's on the West Coast. So
Uh-huh.
it's much cheaper than going to Gen Con for me, but it's still a huge, like I had to plan all year to do it.
Yeah.
And I went to Gen Con, and I was able to attend the POC meet and greet as a publisher offering freelance roles. And we ended up hiring 6 freelance writers from that POC meet and greet. And it was unfortunate that in a lot of ways, like I wish I could have like hired everyone that I talked to,
Mhm.
because I wanted to. I really wanted to, and I liked everyone that I met. Um, and still, it just feels kind of like, unfortunately, it was one of those things where, and I tried to through the leadership team that I've assembled, sort of sort through and make our process for selecting these writers as fair as possible.
Uh-huh.
Um, but it's just unfortunate that like the disparity between like white networking and like how an event like that goes is just like night and day, because like I had 12 to 15 people have really in-depth conversations with me about the vineyard. And then I was only able to hire 6, right?
Yeah.
So I wish I could have hired them all though, because they were all qualified in my opinion, and it was a really tough choice. Um, I just wish more of that was really available, but uh, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, there are only so many jobs to go around, and it just becomes a matter of being mindful about, as a publisher, how you allocate your resources, right?
Yeah,
Like, I don't hire people because I can't afford to. So it's a very easy decision for me to make to say I'm just going to do it all myself. But and this I don't even know where I'm going with that thought.
No, I was actually just about to talk to you about like what what would it take for you to hire people? And I was going to ask you if you have, besides like I saw you had your latest Moss Mother's Maze, which
uh,
you can pick up right now um in the link below.
in
Um
the link below, in the show notes.
um
It would take a huge injection of capital, honestly, for
yeah.
me to hire people. Like I have worked with artists and people in the past, and I have an editor who I work with regularly. But like the deal with my editor is a work swap. Like he's not in the industry. He's an old supervisor from when I did my degree, and he is super interested in RPG writing as a hobby. Um, so I look over his work for him, and he in return edits my writing for me, which is great because it means I don't actually pay for editing. I just get it on a work for hire, and then I
Oh,
do
that's
everything
good.
else. Yeah, literally everything else myself. And part of the reason that I do everything else myself is because when I started out, I was super poor. Like RPG publishing was a way to supplement my income because I was working 2 or 3 days a week in a bar, and supporting me and my ex-partner, and I had literally no money. And so if I wanted to have illustrations or I wanted to have layout or I wanted to have a marketing campaign, I had to teach myself how to do that all myself because I could not afford to pay someone to do it. Um, and that sort of has created this situation where I've just become used to doing it all myself. But I mean, I still don't have the financial freedom to be able to pay people to do stuff for me, um, because if I was going to pay people to do stuff, I would want it to be at what I would perceive to be good rates, not just fair rates, but good rates. Um, and I can't even pay myself good rates at the moment. So yeah, the answer to that question is I would need a lot more money.
Yeah, brief tangent. You worked at a
Uh,
bar?
for many, many, many years, yeah.
Were you a bartender or a waiter or a bouncer?
I've been a bouncer. Most recently, I was a bartender. I was a bartender for 5 years, and I was the whiskey buyer as well. But I didn't get paid extra for that. I just got paid minimum wage for bartending.
Nice. I was a bouncer.
Yeah, it's not a fun job. It's not an
It's
enjoyable job.
not.
No, especially
No.
not when you're like 5'9" and you look small. Like, it's not a fun job.
Yeah, yeah, I bounced for a while as kind of like a lark, because I've had like friends who bounced.
Uh-huh.
I just got into it because I was bored. I was in the service and it was just like, yeah, sure. I met the bartender slash manager and I was like looking around when I was in the bar. Um, and I was like, "Where's your bouncer?" And she was like, "Yeah, actually, I need somebody." And I was like, "Okay, here's my card." And I expected nothing to come of it. But then she texted me Friday night, like at 5 p.m., and was like, "Can you work tonight?" And I was just like, "Yeah, I guess." So I shut down the recruiting office, and then I drove down the road to the bar, and then I showed up, and then the guy who they wanted to fire showed up and they're like, "Hey, it's not going to work out with us. Give me the shirt back." And then they took the security shirt from him and handed it to me.
Oh no.
um, yeah, that night, I actually got into a fight my first night, which was
Yeah, that
wild.
sounds right.
But yeah, I this guy was starting fights with everyone, so we just had to remove him. So we picked him up, and then he was trying to fight the 300-pound bouncer, and I was like, "You don't want to do that, buddy." And then I gave him the hug, like to calm down. I was just like, "Hey, just kind
Uh-huh.
of calm down." And he hit me, so and I don't know why I chose to use the martial art that I've like trained the least. I like as a joke trained Wing Chun for 6 months, and I've like way more experience in like boxing and Muay Thai and like jiu-jitsu and all this other shit. But for some reason, I was in trap range with this guy, and I hit this guy in the face 6 times before his head bounced off the concrete, and I was like, "Oh shit, I just fucking killed a
Oops.
guy," and I was like, "Oh no." But thankfully, the guy's cousin came out and was like, "Yeah, he just got out of prison, so like, we're gonna just leave. And I was just like,
Yeah.
that's a good idea.
Yeah. Bye bye.
I'll I'll see you later.
I had to learn a lot of like de-escalation because I was smaller and people saw me as a
Yeah,
target, but also like like dirty fighting shit, you
right.
know. So like, you want to escort a guy out of the bar who's much bigger than you. You grab him by the armpit hair and pull.
Oh,
You know, shit like that. Stuff that
nice.
just like shuts people down before
Yeah,
they can throw a punch. Like nobody's hard when they get kicked in the shins. That kind of
yeah.
thing, you know.
It's so true.
Um, I
Shin
hated it.
kicks are
I hated it.
brutal.
Yeah, I hated every second of it. Um, But I think I
Yeah,
would go back to it over going back to bar work. So I think I would
yeah.
I think I'd be a bouncer before I was a bartender again.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of like not getting paid enough, like I have so many like weird, wild stories of like shit that happened while I was dancing, and I was making 15 an hour at the time. And this was back in 15, so 8 years ago or so. And like yeah, for sure it was not worth it because like guys are trying to fight you for their honor and like have nothing to
Yeah,
lose, and I'm just like, why are you fighting me? Like
yeah. It got really bad when I was a bartender, actually, because the bar that I worked at only had bouncers Friday night and Saturday night, but we were
oh
busy
yeah.
every night because we were the
Oh,
busiest place. So it was in a suburb of Manchester that's basically a village, and we were open latest. So we were open for half an hour to an hour after every other bar, and there were like 6 bars
oh.
within spitting distance. So people would come in
Yeah.
while we were still open. They were
Yeah.
steaming drunk, and it was very generally me and like two or three like 18, 19-year-old women working.
Yeah.
So it became my job to like shut down creepy guys. And when it's 1 in the
Yeah.
morning and they've been drinking all day and you tell them to fucking behave themselves and wind their neck in,
Right.
they tend to kick off with you. So it ended up
Mhm.
being this like hybrid bartender bouncer role that I really despised. Because as well, like being autistic, like I tend to bring out the worst in people anyway. Like I
Yeah.
will say things that neurotypical can say and everyone laughs at, and I
Right.
say it and people are like, "What the fuck did you just say to me?"
Yeah.
So yeah, not not a great environment for me.
Yeah. I know, I totally get that. That's actually what our bar was like was as well because we were open up an hour later than all the other bars. And so we would get all of the same fucking people that would come in and they would just be looking to fight. And yeah, it was kind of wild sometimes. There was some gang activity in our area. Did you
Oh,
ever have
lovely.
gang activity in your area?
I Not in the bar that I worked at last. I've worked in bars that had like gang stuff going on, but I think gang activity in the UK is very different to gang activity
Right.
in like on like the west coast of the US. It's a different beast. So yes, but not
Yeah.
probably in the way that you mean it.
Right. Yeah, we had a lot of drug dealers for like meth and things like that in the area, so it was that sort of gang activity. And we had a guy, I was like on the other side of the bar at the time, way across the room, and it was a busy Friday night or something. And some guys came in and they grabbed someone that owed them money and threw him down into the crossbar where people put their feet and
Mhm.
started stomping him out. So the bartender grabbed a whiskey bottle and got up on the bar and slammed the whiskey bottle onto someone's head, and that shattered. That went everywhere. And the floor was concrete, so there was like whiskey everywhere, and everyone was fucking slipping. And we had like three people fighting all the bouncers. And I like by the time I got over there, I picked up like the waitress and I like moved her out. And then I had to talk down this big guy that kept touching his piece, um,
Oh, good. Oh, yeah, because
and
you
and
guys
walk him
all have
outside.
fucking guns over there, don't you? We at least don't have
Yeah,
to
we
deal with that
do.
shit. We have
Yeah.
like I don't think I'd want to be a bartender these days because like knife crime is getting pretty bad.
Oh yeah.
Um, but thankfully did not have to deal with any of that shit. I mean, the last time I bartended was 7 years ago now, so
Hmm.
it's been a minute, thankfully.
Yeah. Okay, we're talking about tabletop, right? Okay, so
I think so, yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So let's talk about we talked a little bit about how you're running your business and everything. Let's talk about like printing and other logistics and like
Uh-huh.
for you transitioning to just selling your stuff digitally. Did you start
Mhm.
printing immediately or how did that work out for
No.
you?
I started selling digitally in 2016, and I didn't start printing until 2020. Um, I did a Kickstarter for a little game called Under the Floorboards, which is do you know The Borrowers or the Studio Ghibli film Arrietty? which is based on a book. The Borrowers is an old book by an author called Mary Norton, and there was like a BBC series of it in the 90s when I was a kid that was like super formative for me. So I wrote this game called Under the Floorboards, similar to but legally distinct from The Borrowers. And I did a little Kickstarter in Zine Quest 2020 for it, and it did really well. Like it funded straight away. It made like a couple of $1,000s, which was great because it got me out of debt for the first time in my life. And then I realized that I was going to have to print and ship like 400 books, and I'd never done it before. And so I wrote during the first lockdown in the UK. I worked in the NHS at that point, and I was still going into the office during lockdown, and I was super stressed. And I was like, I want to print something small to sort of as a test run for fulfilling my Kickstarter. And so I wrote this game called The Wretched, which became super popular, like lightning struck. Thankfully, the first print run of The Wretched was only 25 copies. So I printed 25 copies, fulfilled them, was like, okay, this is how you print books, this is how you fulfill them. Then I did Under the Floorboards. Really enjoyed doing it. It was great. Learned a lot from it. And then I did another Kickstarter for a second printing of The Wretched, which did really, really well. We had like, I think 1,200 backers on that or something silly. And that sort of laid the foundations for me being able to turn it into a career. And I realized that I really enjoy working in print, and as stressful as it is to do the fulfillment and stuff, I really enjoyed doing it as well. And so print just sort of became my business from then on. And like The Wretched has just sold its 4,000th print copy. It's the game that keeps going. And yeah, I think I've printed like 30 different products since then, maybe more. I can't remember. Basically, everything I release now gets a print release, though.
Yeah. That's just to put that in perspective for those not in the know. Like, if you're in the past 1,000 sales for any product, even D&D products like that sell over 1,000, you're in the top 0.1%.
Hmm.
But like for a non D&D to print that much, that's amazing.
It's crazy. Like, so at the same time that I was bartending, I worked for Waterstones, who are like the biggest bookshop in the UK. And I worked in the biggest physical bookshop in the north of the UK. So we had 3 floors. We had something like 80,000 unique titles, like 500,000 books on the premises. And I ran front of store. So that was like, when you first walk into the bookshop and the checkouts are there and you've got shelves with a representative sample of the new and good products from every section in the shop, right? That was my section that I ran. And so it was my job to like read everything in the shop basically and pick the new stuff to go out. And we had a reputation as a shop that could break books. So publishers would send us tons of proofs and advanced reading copies, because if the booksellers at our shop got behind a book, it would sell, and it would then start to sell nationally. And I can think of really, really, really amazing books that came out from, like big four publishers that sold 20 copies in hardback and 100 in paperback and never sold another copy. It's crazy. And so that has given me a lot of perspective for what success in the RPG industry looks like in terms of sales numbers. Like, obviously, for me, success means being able to make a living at it consistently. But sales numbers, I think people have a very inflated idea of what good sales numbers look like.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have, and this is just a you for everyone in the industry. You don't have the manufacturing arm and the marketing budget of D&D. And
No.
it's foolish to try and compare yourself to those sales, because that's how a majority of people buy their books, is through marketing.
Yeah. And like a marketing budget, I mean, you probably know from running the Vineyard RPG, I've never been able to pay for marketing, but everyone I know who's done like an actual paid marketing campaign for a Kickstarter says that it basically pays for itself in terms
Yeah.
of pledges generated. And I've never been able to do that. But yeah, you're
Yeah.
never going to compete with. Definitely, no one's ever going to compete with Wizards of the Coast.
Right.
They're making an order of magnitude more money than their next biggest competitor, which is Paizo.
Yeah.
And Paizo are making an order of magnitude more money than, aside from probably Magpie now after the Avatar
Mm-hmm.
Kickstarter, Paizo and Magpie are making orders of magnitude more than their next competitor.
Yeah. Probably
And
like
that's when
Kobo
you're
Press and
that's when you're at the Cobalt Press government game scale, and like they're making orders of magnitude more
yep.
than anyone selling stuff on itch. So like getting perspective on this stuff is really hard, but super important, I think, if you want it to be mentally viable to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And people look at my stuff like the Wretched selling like 4,000 physical copies, and I think we're on 20,000 digital now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, a lot of those digital copies were given away for free in like the racial justice bundle and things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
that looks like huge success. But then I've got games that I'm really proud of, like a little game I wrote called Whale Song, that has sold 6 copies,
Yeah.
6 ever in 2 years of being out. So
Yeah.
you never know what's going to be a hit and what's not, and you just need to be consistent and keep. Don't churn stuff out. You'll burn yourself out. Like I tried to do a
Right.
game a month. I tried to do a game a month at one point, and it nearly killed me. Um, this is why I keep saying to people, like, why I think adventures are so important, because you can either come up with a new system over and over and over and over and over again and hope that it gets popular, or you can support your system. Like everyone who makes money writing 5th edition products is supporting a system. It's not their
Mm-hmm.
system. Um, Everyone who's writing third party, like I write a lot of third party Morkborg stuff, you're supporting a system. And so that's why I've started writing stuff for, I've got a game now called a dungeon game, which I give away for free. It's free online. The PDF is free. I give away free copies to literally anyone who will stand still long enough for me to put one in their hands.
yeah.
Um, and the aim is to just start writing adventures for it and supporting that with adventures, because the more content exists for it, the more people will play it, and the more people who play it, the more people will exist to buy the content that I write for it, is the way I see it. And that's how, it's a cycle. And that's how games like Mothership and Morkborg and Troika and Wanderhome have found their audiences and Mouse Ritter. You could name so many games that have put out a game and then supported it through content and created a robust third party community of content as well. And I think that's the key to creating a sustainable business for yourself, rather than, I know that everybody loves systems and everybody loves a new
Right.
game, but it doesn't feel sustainable to me. Some people get very upset when I say that. Some people disagree very vehemently with me about that, and that is entirely their prerogative. And good luck to them. It's not a model that I have found success with.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where it's like, you wanna reward people for engaging with your system in the first place. You
Yeah,
wanna
totally.
you wanna feed those customers and keep your base of customers loyal. But then
Yes.
also they need stuff to present to other people to be good word of mouth
Yeah,
and act
absolutely.
as your marketing. So that makes sense to me, which is
Yeah.
why we're
Are we
doing an
about to
adventure
segue?
book next, and then
Nice.
after that, we're doing a porn book because
Why not?
there's a fucking it all cycles back to
Yeah.
eventually to where
It all
uh,
comes back to porn.
yeah, it all comes back to porn.
Yeah,
And I still
it's
own the IP because I'm in indie, so it's fine.
perfect. I think, it's one of those things where, like, the sort of games that you're making make it easier or harder to create content for them. I exist in the OSR sphere, which is basically the D&D sphere with the serial numbers filed off, and D&D is a game that lends itself to additional content. And obviously, if you're writing a very focused story game, it can be harder to create additional content for that because sometimes the game, the book, is the entire content, and you're expecting players to make it themselves at the table. Like lots of PBTA stuff, it's hard to write additional content for, and that's not an issue that I know a solution to. But at the same time, games like Brindlewood Bay exist, and they exist on the back of people writing mysteries for them. People have been putting out books of adventure starters and bestiaries for like Dungeon World and Apocalypse World for years. So I don't know what my point is.
No, I'm very, I love this conversation. I've been thinking very deeply about business strategy for us, and I more or less came to the same conclusion in which, unfortunately, a lot of these indie publishers, in my mind, I say unfortunately, who am I to say that? But a lot of them are creating these one-off games that unfortunately don't have the scope and the net to capture a sustainable audience that's going to pay your bills for a long period of time and create residuals and like this steady stream of income for you. But if you
Yeah.
are to create a system that inherently invites you to create expansion packs for it, or loot boxes or whatever, then
Yeah,
then
totally. And like obviously your goal might not be to make money long term from it, and that's good for you. Like, don't do it. It's a mistake. Like the wheels of capitalism will crush you.
yeah,
I think treat it if you're gonna treat it like a business, you need to treat it like a business. And that's when you need to start thinking about like so I often think that with RPGs it's always on a spectrum where on the one end there is like this is the most self-indulgent auteur artistic thing I've ever seen in my life. And that's where things like, and I say this lovingly and without any disparagement, that's where things like lyric games live. Like the lyric games movement was super important and it created some really, really amazing, like genre defying works of art that were entirely uncommercial. And I say that I know it often sounds like a criticism when I say that, and that's not a criticism. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there is toys. There's Hasbro, and it's entirely fueled by: is this a commercial product that people will throw money at? Is this a Funko Pop? And I think if you want to make money, if you want to do this for a living, you need to think about where on that spectrum your work falls. And there is scope to move and there is overlap. Like a lot of my work, I'm a writer. I come from a fiction background and I really value writing. And I really think that the words in an RPG should be the most important thing. And so I very loudly and very aggressively release like plain text books written in full prose with no bullet points and no like um, concessions to ease of use. But I also recognize that that limits my audience. So I will then put out a book for Morkborg that's fully illustrated and laid out like I threw a plate of spaghetti at it. And, you just need to balance your expectations and be smart about what you make, I think, and think about what you want to achieve. Like, if you want to make money, then you need to have commercial considerations. And if you don't care about making money, then fucking good for you.
yeah,
Very genuinely very happy for you because I turned a hobby
yeah.
into a job and it was a mistake. No, it wasn't a mistake. I love it. I love my job.
It depends. Yeah, it depends on your perspective, and I think that's like one of the biggest reservations. Quick segue. Love the visual aspects put into Treasures of the Troll King.
Thank
Um,
you.
it's such an incredible thing. If you are interested in Morkborg, you need to check this out. The link is going to be in the description. You need to take a look at this because it is very, very cool. And is this the same artist that did Morkborg?
Yeah,
Because it looks so similar.
Johan did the cover art for that book, and he also did one piece of internal art and one piece of like header text on top of another piece of art. But the rest of it is me. And Johan
Incredible.
also very kindly has done the cover for a more recent adventure I put out called A Waning Light, which is one of those that's further on the spectrum towards like self-indulgent art piece. Like it's very deliberately not laid out like a Morkborg book and doesn't look like a Morkborg book. And Johan's art for the cover, it still looks like his art because he's got a very distinct style, but it's much more restrained than Treasures of the Troll King and anything that's in the official Morkborg book, which was cool. I like that he read that adventure and sort of like got it and understood what I was going for. Because
Yeah.
I didn't ask him to do a cover for that. I put it out with a cover that I'd drawn, and he bought it and he read it and he messaged me and was like, "Can I draw a
Oh,
cover for the next printing of this book?" I'm like, yes, of course you can.
wow. Yeah, I think that's one of the most exciting things for me as a designer, as the director of these projects, is seeing how artists interpret the written word and they put
It's
it.
great.
I love it. It's so addictive. It's so addictive.
Yeah,
I love it so much. It's one of my favorite parts of the process.
yeah, I
Um,
love it, and I've been very lucky because, like I said before, I don't work with artists very often. I've been very lucky to be able to like become friends with Johan and have the opportunity to work with him in small ways because I couldn't afford to pay him to like illustrate a full book, you know. Um, but you know, he like the Treasures of the Troll King Kickstarter in a lot of ways enabled me to go full time. Like the Wretched and Under the Floorboards got me out of debt and kind of got me financially secure, and Troll King paid for a deposit on a house for me and enabled me to
oh,
quit my job. And
beautiful.
yeah, that would not have happened if Johan hadn't done the cover art for that adventure. So
Yeah,
very,
that's
very grateful
wonderful.
to him.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I want so badly to move in a direction where the industry becomes at least sustainable in a way.
Hmm.
With the rise of inflation and like the terrible economies and like um, how difficult it is with the looming threat of like plagiarism and AI and things like that,
Yeah,
being used to basically just rip the profits of the creative works from artists and from designers and writers, and put it in the hands of just essentially grifters,
yeah.
is very frustrating and it's very scary.
It is, and you know, I'm not without sin. Like when Midjourney first came out, I got really excited about it, and I used it on a couple of things, and then the conversation happened, and I was like, "Oh shit, okay, maybe I shouldn't have used that." And so I've made a very conscious effort over the past year, past 18 months, to A, go back through anything that I published that had Midjourney art in and take it out, and B, to work on my own skills so that I can take it out and replace it with art that I've drawn myself. Because my original thought on it was, oh, art sells books. People like me can't afford to pay artists. Use some AI art. You'll sell more books. You'll get a budget that you can then pay a real artist with. But that's such a simplified version of the whole thing. And the more I've listened to artists talk about it, and the more I've seen the attitude of the people behind it, the more I've realized how misguided I was with that. Um, and I only used it in I think two projects very early on, and I deeply regret it. Um, and I'm very glad that I've been able to like reissue those books without any of that shit in them. Because yeah, fuck it,
Yeah.
fuck everyone involved in that at this point.
Thank you for being open and sharing that. I didn't know any of that. I likewise, I think so I didn't publish anything with AI art just through happenstance, but I think when it initially came out and I was approaching methods to market or just whatever and just do some marketing, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, I was looking into a particular person who used AI in combination with photography, and I won't mention who they are, but I'm
Uh-huh.
sure you've seen them.
I think I
And
probably know exactly who you mean because they have
yeah,
very big like YouTube videos about their process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was very interested in it because of the explanation that I was given by them and how
Yep.
it was ethical.
And
And
another tool in his arsenal
right.
and XYZ. Yes. Yep.
Right, yeah. And so I was interested in that. I asked my art director about it, and then my art director gave me a full education. And I was like, okay, well,
Okay. Yeah. I
that's
was
it.
wrong about this. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think
Totally.
you've touched on probably one of the most important things moving forward with the industry that we have briefly touched on with, I guess, the government game stuff and some of the other controversies and how the industry is shaping up. If the industry wants to survive, and have more publishers than Wizards of the Coast, we cannot allow AI to replace
No,
workers.
definitely not. No. And it's a shame that it's gone the way it has because before the AI thing exploded, I was super interested in like feeding just my work into like a large language model and seeing what it would produce.
Hmm.
And because of the way these commercial models have been trained now, there is just no ethical way to do it. And even if you were to build your own model trained entirely on a data set that you controlled, that you knew exactly what was in it, that had no infringement whatsoever, that stain would still be on it. And it's really shit that crypto bros have to come and ruin everything, basically, is what it comes down to. Like, I can totally see a use case for an artist with a really strong visual style being like, I want to train it's a generative program on my own art and see what it creates. And you just can't do that now, which
Yeah,
because it could have been a very useful tool for people, but it's so poisonous now,
yeah,
and there's just no way to know that anybody using it is doing it ethically,
yeah,
um, and that's a problem.
yeah. And it's a huge problem in the pro GM community because people use it for their thumbnails to advertise their
Oh
games on the
my god!
marketplace. It's everywhere. And people like
So
have tried to justify it in some ways to me, and they're like, "Hey, but I can't afford art, and I can't afford this." And I'm like, "You don't need AI
yeah,
art.
you
You
don't
need a
need it.
stock image that you zoom in on, or
Yeah,
you need to learn some skills." But it's
I
like,
spoke to a guy this weekend, and I won't say who he is or what his company is called, partly because I don't want to put him like actually on blast, but also because I can't remember right now, which is very handy. But he's building apparently, and I'm doing air quotes here, which Friday can see, but listeners can't. He's building AI assisted GM tools, right? And I don't know what he thinks these are going to be useful for. I think he wanted them to generate like adventures and shit on the fly. But while he was picking up my books and looking at them, he didn't know the difference between an adventure and a system. And he said that he'd read Mork Borg but didn't understand if that was a game or if that was an adventure to be played with D&D. And I'm like, what business do you have developing tools for GMs when you don't understand the fundamentals of the field? And that's exactly what we see with people wanting to generate novels using AI, people wanting to generate AI art, is they have no respect for the craft. They have
mhm,
no respect for art as a field. They have no respect for writing. They just want to churn out something that they can slap a price tag on.
yeah. And Drive Through RPG and DM Skills is fucking flooded with that bullshit,
Is it
and it's
really? I haven't
it is
looked on either of them in a
flooded.
long time. That doesn't surprise me.
It's so sad because it's
Yeah.
like you have all of these people attempting to use these websites that rightfully have propped up a lot of creators in the industry and brought so much power to all these different voices that got their first like piece of exposure. And it's basically just being taken up. You have like fields and fields of all these new generated tokens, maps, other things, and it's just disgusting.
And
It's
it's
depressing.
especially with maps, like there are obviously some people who spend so much time and effort creating these beautiful maps, but you can create a map that looks amazing in a commercial product in like 15 minutes if you need to,
Yeah.
which is going to be faster than trying to get AI to generate one and then make it usable.
Yeah.
Like this is shit you can teach yourself to do.
Yeah.
It's
Laziness. It's
crazy. Yeah.
it's it's purely just greed. It's greed. And
It's
like for the pro
I've,
GM that I've dealt with, unfortunately, that and there's a ton of them, unfortunately, but the pro GM that I dealt with tried to justify their like, hey, I'm in a bad situation. I can't afford, an artist to pay for my thumbnail or whatever.
mhm.
And, this is what I'm doing in the meantime. And then, I find out they announced like, hey, I'm going on a backpacking vacation through Europe. And I'm just like, it was never about the money.
No,
It was never about your
it wasn't
impoverished
that
state.
you couldn't afford to pay for it. It was that you didn't want to allocate your funds towards it.
The conscious choice. It was a conscious
Yeah.
choice by that person to instead of like use some stock art, which plenty of pro GMs have been successful using.
Yeah.
You just need
I
to
used
zoom in a little bit.
same with like publishing. I used stock art on my DM skill stuff and early like non-DM skill stuff for a very, very, very long time. And like one of the most popular posts on my blog still is like how to make good looking books using just stock art and other free resources. And the second I realized that AI was a shit show and was like, you can't use this anymore. You shouldn't use this in the first place. I went back to using stock art and then worked on my own art until it got to a point where I felt like I could stop using the stock art and start producing artwork myself. And obviously that means that the production timelines of my books is inflated,
Hmm.
but then you have to spend time looking for good stock art anyway. If you were working with an artist, you'd have to be spending time finding the artist, agreeing rates, waiting for sketches, approving sketches, waiting for them to come back. So there's no what's the word I'm looking for? There's no any reason to cut that corner is just an excuse to cut that corner. And it's impatience, it's greed, it's not wanting to care or do better. It's a willful choice. And at this point, I mean, obviously, I'm not in the position to say that I can forgive myself for something, but I feel like I can be understanding of people who used it 2 years ago. But
Hmm.
anyone using it now has had ample time to understand why they shouldn't be doing it.
Hmm. Yeah, the point of the top of conversation has definitely moved on, especially for publishers
Yeah,
and designers and stuff like that. And the conversation is really everywhere. So you're willfully choosing at this point to just be ignorant about it.
yeah.
So,
And, the argument, I can't afford to pay an artist, therefore it's not hurting anyone, on the surface looks like it makes sense on the surface if you don't interrogate it in any way. But it doesn't hold up under any sort of scrutiny.
the dungeon game, why should people buy it?
There's no AI art in it.
Oh, okay. That's a
And
start.
it's also free, so you can't buy it, you can just read it for free. It's so a dungeon game is the culmination of many years of thinking about D&D and thinking about the way I like to play it and what I want from it. It's super rules light. Character creation can be done in 5 minutes, um, and it's super. It's got a lot of stuff in it that I haven't seen anyone else really do, um, but it also plays really well at the table because sometimes you get novel mechanisms that look good on paper, and I've been guilty of writing this sort of thing as well. But when you actually try and sit down and play them, it doesn't really make any sense. A dungeon game is one of those games where some of the rules look a bit weird on paper, but when you sit down and use them, they're super fun. So the central hook of a dungeon game, and you might appreciate this actually because I wrote this mechanism while I was in between sets of very heavy deadlifts,
Oh, beautiful.
thinking about how RPGs don't really model strength very well, actually.
Yes.
So the central thing in a dungeon game, you have three stats: agility, brawn, and cunning. And anytime you fail a roll, you can burn your stats to exert yourself and succeed on the roll, but it makes your stat weaker in future. And so it gets harder to do things again until you rest. And then when you rest, you recover some of the stats that you've exerted, and there is a chance that your stat gets better as a result of you having exerted it. Because when you lift something heavy and then rest, you get stronger. When you do something mentally taxing and then rest and have time to think about it, you get better at doing those things in future.
I don't I don't know why this happened, but I started tearing up. Um, that is such a beautiful mechanic. Oh my god. That's amazing. I love that.
Literally wrote it at like 5 a.m. on Twitter in between PB attempts about 3 years ago, and finally had an excuse to put it in a game.
Oh
And
my
I,
god.
I, I love it. It's worked so well, and it's led to so many really great moments at the table. Um, and it's very similar to something like Spellburn in Dungeon Crawl Classics, but the twist on it is that it's it's one of several advancement mechanisms in the game. So you can start with like a 13 strength, and the more you use your strength, the stronger you're gonna get.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. Oh my god, I love that. Um I love that so much. That is so fucking cool. Okay.
Thank you.
Um wow, that's great. Download it for that reason.
Yeah, go and get it. You can get it from several places.
Uh-huh.
There's a web version, like a wiki online version that I keep
Uh-huh.
updated. But there's also, your classic PDF on itch that you can download.
Let's talk about the Moss Mother's Maze.
Yes. Moss Mother's Maze is the first full-length adventure for a dungeon game. So it's sort of representative of everything that I want a dungeon game to be. So it's a very lethal, old school dungeon crawl rooted in the sort of landscape and mythology of the area of the UK that I grew up in. Um, but it also comes with a load of additional stuff because something that I'm very interested in, if anyone's ever read my Twitter for more than 5 minutes, you'll know that I'm really interested in how game texts onboard new players and how we learn games both through reading and through play. And so um, the Moss Mother's Maze and a dungeon game come with sort of these two pamphlets. One's called So You Want to Explore a Dungeon, and one's called So You Want to Run a Dungeon Game. And they are aimed at specifically players who have got some familiarity with RPGs, maybe through like 5th edition or Pathfinder 2, but aren't particularly au fait with OSR style play, addressing some of the stumbling blocks that you might have and some of the assumptions of play that you might not be familiar with, and trying to teach the game in a way that's like makes it approachable. Um,
Mhm.
and a dungeon game itself is full of like uh, what I think are some of the best written examples of play in the industry. I obviously am very biased because I wrote them, but a ton of thought has gone into how I present this game to people who both are familiar with OSR and people who are not. And all the feedback that I've had from people has been that the efforts have been worth it. Um, a lot of people have been playing it. A lot of people have been telling me about their games, and a lot of people have told me that they had previously not enjoyed the style of play, but now they get it, and so that feels like a success to me. And yeah, the Moss Brothers Maze is really great. I really like it. It's one of my favorite adventures that I've ever written and run. I've run it a few times. I ran it on the Plus One EXP channel a few months ago. If anyone wants to watch it, we actually managed to do the whole adventure in like 4 hours, which was cool. I didn't expect that to happen, but yeah, it's really great. I really like it, and it's fully
Yeah.
illustrated by me as well, which some of the best illustrations I've ever drawn are in this book as well.
The amount of like care and quality that I received. So I received the physical copy for our listeners, and the physical copies are like it's beautiful. It's actually like I had someone when I was pulling it out and I was like looking at it, and they were like, "Oh, that's like an old game. Let me check that out." And then they like touched it and they're like, "Oh, this is new," because of the cover art and stuff. So I was just like, "Yeah, it's a OSR style game that's meant to
Yeah,
look old." Yeah.
yeah. All the there's a very specific branding that I've gone for with these books. That's like very old Penguin classics and like
Uh-huh.
old sort of like geometric design, which is something that I really love.
Yeah. I felt like I was transported back into like those paperback stores. That's what I
Perfect.
felt. Yeah, that's what I felt like. I was just like I was like looking through like a half price books or something like that,
That's
and I was just
exactly
like,
what I was going for.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was it's beautiful. It like kind of took me back a little bit. I was just like, oh, this is so precious, and like I just want to like it. I felt like a kid again a little bit when I was going
Perfect.
through it.
Excellent. That's
Yeah.
exactly what. Because I mean, one thing we forget a lot of the time is that RPGs are toys. It's all playing with toys. And yes, it's an art form, and yes, it can be kind of transformative and give us these really heightened, like emotional experiences. But it's also playing with toys, and I think we get away from that sometimes. And we should remember that it is just fun, and that's something that I really wanted. That's something that like a letter-sized or bigger hardback book doesn't give me, but a little paperback book that I can fold up and stuff in my back pocket does for some reason, and I can't explain why, but that's why these books are formatted the way they are.
Yeah. That's that's beautiful. I think that's a great place for us to pause our podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.